Top 10 financial resolutions. Are they worth it?
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Yeah, Brian. So this time of year, people start thinking about, we're about to turn over the calendar. It's going to be new year, new me. There are things I want to accomplish. And we said, this happens perennially. This isn't every single year thing. And a lot of times people want to hone in on getting their financial house in order or improving something financially. We said, you know what? Let's go see if we can find 10 of the most common, most used, most said financial New Year's resolutions and add a little bit of money guy. Well, one, say if they're any good, if you should make this right. And two, add a little bit of the money guy flair to it.
So this hit me, and I always do stuff off script. It drives everybody crazy because we have show meetings, and this should have come up.
How about we just met for hours?
Is there any financial resolution, not financial, is there any New Year's resolution that's actually stuck in your life?
Oh, man. That's a...
No dead air. You have to have
I'm
an answer.
All I'm thinking about right now is all the ones that have not.
So I have two.
I can't think of one.
Think
that's
of this
because
I have had two that stuck, and this is what hit me because I was sitting here thinking about financial resolutions. Like I said, should have brought this up earlier. My quiet time in the morning, Bible study. That's a resolution that came through, and it's actually stuck. Working out.
Yeah. I was with you.
This dad bod, it does not look like I work out. Imagine what it looked like if I didn't work out 3 times a week. That was a New Year's resolution that stuck too. So there is some power to this concept of I'm going to start the year anew and I'm going to create new habits.
Sure.
Can I get the momentum to make it be successful? So with all that, have you had anything that kind of stuck?
Because here's what I'll do. I'll be militant. I had that one a few years ago that you and I did, and I was like, I'm going to do 50 burpees every single day for a year. And the month of January, I killed it. But then, you get a cold or you have a late night and you're like, I'm not doing burpees. I'm going to sleep. I think I set my bar too high. I don't know. No. So to answer your question, no, I've never actually stuck with one. Maybe 2021 will be the year.
You know how you have people, you say you're a CrossFit person or you're not a CrossFit person?
Right.
Your answer there is the most CrossFit answer I've ever heard because I actually go to a workout place that you do things by, and this is old school because we usually stick to the script, where you'll do treadmill, then you'll do rower, and then you'll do weight floor, and you start at different stations.
Yeah.
I always pay attention to what the weight floor is doing. As soon as I hear they're doing burpees, I skip that part of the class. I leave. I physically leave the class when I find out there's burpees. So that just shows me a lot about who you are. So, okay, let's get this train on track. Let's talk about these top 10 financial resolutions, and are they really worth your time? Because, look, I think that is something. I want to make sure, just like I talked about, I do have resolutions in general that have stuck, that have changed my life, that actually made me a better person. I want this to be kind of the stimulus for you to also change your life for the better on the financial side. For sure. And we're definitely the type of coaches, your tour guides, your navigators that will help you know, is this even worth considering? So I have a unique one. You threw a little cold water on this, but I'll kick it off and then let you kind of play the Darth Vader role. But number 10 was, and Daniel and I put this in there, this is kind of an FTE Daniel contribution with me, is that we put you should enjoy yourself.
So this should be a New Year's resolution going into 2021.
No, this is a unique 2021 resolution. This won't be in the 2022 episode. This hasn't been in past episodes. It's because 2020 was just a wild year.
Yep.
I mean, there is just so many things.
Still is.
I mean,
still
it is. I mean, there's
year.
still weird stuff going on. I mean, if you just think about all the different things we've dealt with. So I'm telling you, just like when somebody comes into a huge windfall, I always tell them, go buy something. Go buy something that you would never buy for yourself, something that's frivolous. I'm kind of giving you a little bit of latitude in 2021. Go do something to help you enjoy yourself because there's been a lot of stuff that you've been restricted and not allowed to do in 2020. Think about and internalize what are those things and go do more of it in 2021 to kind of reward yourself.
See, now when you give it all that context, it makes all the sense. Because when I saw this, I was like, New Year's resolution, enjoy yourself. I feel like we in the society and country that we live in, that's the exact opposite of what our resolution should be because we do stats all the time about how, 40% of folks can't afford one of the basic necessities in life, or 59% of folks don't have $1,000 to get an emergency fund. I was like, people don't need to enjoy themselves more. They need to like enjoy themselves less and practice deferred gratification. But you did put something in the notes that I thought was beautiful. If you're following the financial order of operations, if you're doing the things that you're supposed to be doing, and if you're saving the 20 to 25% that you should be saving for the future, you're setting yourself up that you can go enjoy yourself more and not feel guilt about that. Whether that's going to that movie or taking that trip or going out to eat or whatever your enjoy yourself is, if you know you're doing the right things first, you can set yourself up to do it guilt-free. That I like.
And I think that's a good point because I think it is kind of, think about when you have diets. I don't like diets because they're short term, they're restrictive, and I see a lot of diets that have cheat days.
Sure.
I want you to use this where I'm giving you a little extra freedom for this one year. It's kind of as a cheat day, but use it as also not as a diet. Look at it as a diet. Look at it as a change of lifestyle.
Yep.
That's what I kind of hope this list hits that way.
Got it.
But I do think 20 to 25%, that's the goal. Get to it as fast as you can because you'll find out, what do we always talk about? Discipline, money, and time are the three main ingredients to wealth. The sooner you can have the discipline to save the money, put it to work, and then give it the time to nurture, grow, and turn into what it's going to be, you'll be incredibly rewarded.
Yep, love it.
So number 9, get better, and this is a word I hate, at budgeting.
Yeah, I was going to say, in this top 10 list, we're going to get something that we actually like, but when I saw this one, I was like, oh, budgeting's kind of awful, right? Like it's not something that I personally love doing, but it probably is a necessary evil, especially for someone who's out of whack or maybe someone who's brand new in their financial journey.
Well, I'm an eternal optimist. I look at most things I do, even if they're bad things. Like you tell me there's a whole stack of firewood that I have to go chop over there. Nobody wants to wake up and necessarily go, you know what, that's going to be exciting to go chop that firewood, but I will find the positive of doing that activity. Budgeting is one of those things where tremendous benefits if you do this, but I think it's another thing. Once again, it's a glass half empty, negative type activity you have to do. But I promise you, if you will put the time in the beginning on this, the dividends that will be paid later so you can loosen the reins and actually not budget because you'll create the muscle memory or the budget memory or the wallet memory so that you never have to consider restricting yourself like you did with a budget. But how do you know what your burn rate is? How do you know how your cash flow is being spent if you've never, ever tracked it? And that's what I thought was really powerful, Bo, because we put in here, there's some great apps. And you had, I don't know if you can, because I don't want you to break any confidences, but you had a friend that went just hog wild crazy when he found out you were familiar with some of these apps.
Yeah, what's crazy is, technology, we are all the benefactors of technology kind of changing the world. And none more so than in the financial space, because now, whereas people used to like budget like with a piece of notebook paper and have their pencil and they have to track it and do their envelopes, now there's all kinds of technology and systems out there that you can use. We just threw a couple up there that you may be familiar with. There's actually, I think, is this one new, Daniel, or relatively new? By Quicken, Simplify, which is like a budgeting app. YNAB, which is you need a budget. This is the one I was talking to a potential client. He was telling me he found this a year or two ago and just loves it. Like it just has changed his life in terms of how granular he can be. Mint is one that's been around for a long time. It'll aggregate and pull in your transactions and you can kind of code them. And then if you just want to be old school, if you just want to be, I say old school and I'll talk about a technological solution, you can use a spreadsheet. And that way you have total customization and you can design it to be as simple or complex as you want. But there are tools at your disposal that there's not really a good excuse for you not to get a budget in place if you're someone who needs to be working through that part of your financial journey.
So something just hit me as I saw this slide. You realize Intuit owns Mint. Intuit also owns Quicken because they own TurboTax, Quicken, all those things. Lacert, if you're a CPA, you'll know about that one. But so Simplify, I'm curious how much overlap it has from Mint since it's common ownership. So that's interesting. And FTE Daniel, you said that Simplify is cheaper than you need a budget.
Yeah, it's about $4 a month or $50.
So about
$4 a month for Simplify by Quicken.
That's interesting. So, and then by the way, I threw this in there as just kind of as an extra points of a behavior that I think New Year's resolution wise that we look so forward to, and it fits in this category. you got to be doing a net worth statement.
That's right.
Guys, do not miss that opportunity. Now, that is, I think it's kind of poetic that your last thing on the bottom right there was Excel.
Yep.
Because that's you could use Google Sheets, you could use
Thank you for
Excel.
By the way, the chat is blowing up right now from folks telling me, guys, what about Google Sheets? Yeah, we mean like a spreadsheet. You don't have to, if you're not an Excel person, you're a Google Sheets person.
I'll apologize to you guys.
Person.
Bo's kind of old school. He likes Microsoft Excel. He's not hip like me where I'm using Google Docs and Google Sheets. You know, he's practically talking about Lotus 1, 2, 3. That's right. You know, you have to be careful of this old guy here.
Dial up over here.
But don't forget about the net worth statement. It is my favorite tradition. There'll be many more things. I'm going to talk about that in coming episodes, but don't miss that opportunity.
You know what? That's one. What I found, you asked me if I stuck to any New Year's resolutions at the beginning of the show. I do my net worth statement every single year, and I do it on the last day of the year. I do use that to form, hey, these are areas that I want to improve, whether it's an asset or a debt or whatever, in the new year. Those are some I've stuck to. So I just want to throw that out there. Your net worth statement, if you're not tracking it, how on earth can you know, am I on pace, behind pace, ahead of the curve, behind the curve? It's a fantastic tool in your tool belt.
And then I'll throw this out there just as kind of a teaser for something that we ought to do more discussions on, is because we talked about how it's not fun to do budgeting, but if you do it right and you do it consistently enough, you will create that wallet memory.
That's right.
So what's the graduation point, or what's the next step? We always talk about a cash management plan, that's what I'm talking about, just to give you a peek behind the curtain. I'm talking about create, in turn, as much of your financial life into an automated solution, meaning that automatically every month, your mortgage is coming out, your financial, your investments. I mean, I've told you guys, mine is kind of, it's turned into a Frankenstein that I actually have dollar cost averaging coming out about every week now into my investments, because I want everything to be as automated as possible. Because here's what happens. Every time my income goes up, I don't allow for that income just to flow to more consumption and consumerism. I automatically, as pay myself first, I figure out how much I'm going to give more to charity, how much more I'm going to pay myself by investing in the future, and I'll go in there and I will tweak all those automated savings things. So I create this situation I call forced scarcity. So even though my income keeps going up, the family doesn't feel like, hey, oh my gosh, we're rolling in it. I want there to be some scarcity or constraint on there to keep things healthy.
Yeah, I think if you can shift your mindset. I was scrolling through Instagram the other day, and I follow this guy who talks a lot about debt. And I think he said one thing on there, and it was like, don't save what's left over after you spend what's left over after you save. That's having a cash management plan. If you can have that mindset, you're going to set yourself up for success.
Yeah, plus you'll get addicted to saving.
That's
and by the way, there's no support groups for people addicted to saving. You just become an empire builder. That's the reality of the situation. So number 8, our favorite to at least discuss. We don't deal with this that much, but pay off high interest debt.
Yeah, this is one I think that a lot of people, I mean, the picture that Daniel picked for this one, this poor guy looking at his bills, face in his hands. I do think a lot of people go into the new year saying, hey, I've got to figure this out. I've got to get rid of this credit card debt or this retail debt or whatever this high interest debt is, because we talk all the time about how powerful compounding interest can be on the upside. It can be just as dangerous if it's working against you.
Well, I want to set the table is that this is something, and I think this is a big shock to people. We don't deal with high interest debt a lot in our professional job. Remember, we're fee-only financial advisors and planners. Is that, and this is what I talk about, is why if you want to be a financial mutant, we're counting on that if you're here listening to our content, you're going deeper into the financial order of operations. A lot of times you are in the top 20%, meaning of you don't struggle with basic discipline, behavioral issues.
That's right.
Ramsey Solutions, Dave Ramsey, a neighbor of ours, we've talked about him a good bit. They are brilliant at getting people out of debt. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys, if you struggle with paying off your credit card every month, if you're part of that 60% that can't come up with $1,000, that's a problem. That's a big, discipline problem, huge problem. So a big part of what's keeping you poor is the credit card debt. And remember, we're not against credit card use, because we assume you're paying it off monthly. Now, if you cannot have the discipline to pay it off monthly, you're actually carrying a balance, you're paying those just tremendously damaging interest rates, You just need to go cold turkey.
That's right.
And maybe take a step back, go pick up the basic behaviors that get you out of high interest debt, and then come back and we're your huckleberries to make sure you're ready for the future. And we want to give you kind of an opportunity cost analysis of how bad this can be to your wealth creation.
Yeah, so this is the dark side of compounding interest. So let's just say that there's a 22-year-old out there that has the average credit card balance making the minimum monthly payment. Well, there's a few variables you need to know. First of all, the average interest rate on a credit card right now in this country is somewhere just below 18%, about 17.76%.
Now, you know, you did this. By the way, I told them to keep this interest rate in there.
I know. You did.
The interest rate has actually gone below 17 because interest rates have gone down. But 1776, the founding of America. So I just want to make sure, put that asterisk in there. You guys know, but it wasn't that long ago. It was just a few months ago. It was 1776.
So it's high, right? It's somewhere in the 17-18% range. Well, most credit cards are structured so that they have a minimum payment. You don't have to pay it off every month. They're more than happy if you want to carry a balance over. And what they'll usually say is you can pay either $25 or 3%, whichever of those numbers is greater. And if you look at the average credit card balance right now in this country, it's a touch under $6,200.
Yeah.
Well, if you were that 22-year-old that had that $6,200 credit card balance, it would take you 179 months or almost 15 years by paying the minimum payment to pay that off. So not only did you pay off the $6,200 in debt, there was another $5,500 in interest that you paid over that 15-year period.
So you're thinking that's pretty bad. I basically paid, I paid twice as much for whatever goods I bought. So you almost spent $12,000 for something that originally cost $6,000. That's not a return. That's a cost.
That's a cost.
To you.
That's right.
But we know there's another cost, an opportunity cost that's even bigger.
So if instead of making those minimum payments, what if you didn't buy that thing and you just took the exact amount you're paying for those minimum payments and you invested it? Well, we know that starting at 22, all the way through those next 15 years, those minimum payments will have turned in to about $35,000. So instead of costing you about $12,000, now you actually have $35,000 in the bank working for you. 35,000 soldiers in your army of dollar bills. But that's just the first 15 years.
That's just the first stage of opportunity cost. There's another opportunity cost because, look, if you built up $35,000, you're probably, like I said, there's no support group to those that get addicted to saving and investing for the future. You're actually going to want to do more of it. So if you let that $35,000 continue to work for you, your army of dollar bills until you retire, what does it become, Bo?
You can see that it actually turns into just over $573,000 by the time that you get to age 65. Remember, all that you put in was just a little under $11,737 turned into $573,000 by the time you retired. So that one purchase that 22-year-old made at $6,200 at the very beginning of their journey could have realistically cost them over $500,000 in retirement.
I think it's worth just boiling this down even more because there's a reason I have this koozie. It says this $1 beer for the 21-year-old cost me $88 when they retire at 66. I think that this is what I want you to look at money a little differently. This is the financial mutant part. If you spent $6,000, you ran up $6,000 worth of credit card interest, I always tell people, you not only are down $6,000, you have to make it back just to get to zero. So that's the opportunity. So the time it takes to get you back to zero is an opportunity cost of time, the most valuable thing. And then if you're running interest, that's the other 50.
That's the dark side.
It's that part that takes it to $11,700, and then it costs you $573 in retirement. That one decision could cost you close to $600,000 in retirement. It's those little slip-ups. It's those big decisions like the cars, the houses, the credit cards, the high interest debt that is, consumerism that is going to keep you from reaching all the goals that you think, that you know, that you can have possible. You just have to make sure you have the discipline to make it work.
So this is one that we like. If you are someone who has high interest debt, yes, by all means, follow the financial order of operations and get that paid off yesterday.
Number 7. Grow your emergency fund.
Yeah, this is one. This is actually a good one. I like this as a New Year's resolution because if you're someone out there who's flying naked, the emergency fund is the thing that protects you. It's the thing that prevents you from derailing your entire financial circumstance.
We've, you guys know, if you go to moneyguy.com/resources, you can download your free financial order of operation resource. And here's what I think is interesting. Number 4, because the number 1 is deductibles covered. That's just making sure you have enough cash to, if big things happen to you, you're all right. And then number 4 is emergency reserves. This is so important that it gets 2 slots out of our 9 to focus on this. And then here's the other thing I think is it's humbling. I've screwed this up tremendously all through the years, and I'll get to a few of these examples. But the big one I want to kind of intro it with, just because you have access to cash now, does not mean you truly have emergency reserves. Exactly right. And I want to tell you 2 risks that I think you have to be careful of. If you have a home equity line, that you have a checkbook or debit card, because we're back to doing these crazy behaviors we were doing back before the Great Recession, that is not an effective emergency reserves. Nope. Number 2, if you have a portfolio of investment assets and it's in a taxable account, you're like, well, I could always just go sell some stocks, or I could go sell a mutual fund or an index fund. That will be my emergency reserves. No, because if the market's getting crushed and it's down 20, 25%, the last place you want to go get cash is from those assets that are now down 25% from where they were. You're going to be disgusted with yourself that's where you're having to pull the money out for emergencies. Because remember, downturns, drama, these are all miserable, lonely things that never travel around by themselves. Misery loves company. So what you'll typically find is bad stuff travels in packs. You'll have downsides in the economy. You'll have job losses. You'll have the stock market get crushed. You'll have the real estate market get crushed. And they'll all happen at the same time because, like I said, misery loves company. Prepare. Do not disrespect financial order of operations and the power of emergency reserves.
So as you're sitting there thinking, okay, you've sold me, Brian. You told me I got to have it. It matters. Yeah, it stinks that my cash is paying next to nothing right now, but it's not there to make me money. It's there to keep me protected. The next question someone would naturally have is, okay, well, how do I know what my emergency reserves should be? Well, our answer very simply is, it depends on where you are in your financial journey. Are you someone who's early on in the accumulation phase, or are you someone who's later on in retirement? What does your marital status look like? What does your income situation look like?
Well, let's give them some, because everybody knows. The typical, if you go read any financial book or you listen to any talking head, they're going to say 3 to 6 months.
That's the given.
No. You just did it. 3 to 6 months is the general guidance. How do you know if you're 3? How do you know if you're 6?
Yeah, so one I would think of that's pretty easy. If you have people depending on your income specifically, like maybe you are the higher income earner in your household, or maybe you have a stay-at-home spouse, or there are things that are pulling on your income really substantially, that if it were to go away tomorrow, you would, 1, be in trouble, and 2, have a hard time finding another job at a similar pay scale. You should probably err towards that 6 month. You should probably carry a little bit heavier emergency reserve.
So if you're the big breadwinner in your house, everybody's kind of like, just say you're like that big earner, and then you have another spouse that's helping with the kiddos.
Sure.
That one should be closer to 6 months.
Absolutely.
And if you're in a technical job, it's going to take a long time to get a job. How about somebody, because in America now, a lot more couples, everybody's working. Everybody's trying to save money. So how about those situations?
If you're a single individual and you're highly employable, meaning if you were to lose your job today, you could go find another job pretty quickly, 3 months might be your ticket. Or if you're a married person and both of you make around the same income, or it's potential that if either one of you were to lose your jobs, you'd still have enough to keep the lights on and pay the bills, then you probably could shrink it down to a 3 month or so emergency reserve.
And I'll throw one other caveat before we get to retirees, because that's kind of unique, is that if you are, and I said this already, but it might even go beyond 6 months, I have found, like a lot of my neighbors, when you get to a station in life and you're in such a specialized technical executive or some role, you might have to move to get another job that pays you. That needs to be built into. So you're probably, if you are at that level now of success, that if you lost your job, that you'd have to physically relocate your entire life to get the same job, you probably need to create a little extra margin to make sure, because your situation's kind of specialized. Now that leads to another specialized group. Retirees, should they do 3 to 6 months? That seems kind of crazy when you're living off the money.
Absolutely not, because no matter how well you've planned, no matter how prepared you are for retirement, there's going to be a psychological shift that happens when you go from working with your hands and your back and your feet to now counting on your army of dollar bills to work for you. What you want to do is set yourself up for success, given that psychological change is going to happen. So what we always tell our retirees is that depending on your circumstance, you should have in cash anywhere from 12 to 18 months of liquid cash of expenses. So whatever it costs you to run your household, you should have that amount sitting in your emergency reserve.
And I would even go further is that there's one thing emergency reserves, but you might want to have well over 36 months of easy, safe assets like fixed income or other things that you can get to very quickly and very easily. Okay, let's talk about the number 6. This one is so big, but so boring. So I think a lot of people
don't sell it too hard.
No, it's true though, and that's why I want to put everybody on notice. You've got to pay attention because this one is a snooze fest, but I can see so many people screw this up, and we're usually the ones that have to pick it up out of the ditch when they become new clients to tell them why this is so important. And it's number 6 is update your beneficiaries.
Yeah, so none of us know when that proverbial bus is going to hit us. Well, a lot of financial accounts have it structured that if that bus does hit us, we can decide on this side of the grave where we want our assets to go to. And we can make sure that we say, okay, I want this account to go to this person or spread across these people. Well, if you want that to happen, you have to make sure that what's actually listed on your beneficiary is exactly what you want to happen.
Yeah, and here's something that people, I think, get a little confused about. Because we tell you, if you have children, go get wills because you got to have a place for them to land. You need to let everybody know what your last will and wishes and all the things of how you want to be taken care of. That's important. But people don't realize beneficiary designations work completely independent of what your will says unless you put in the beneficiary that you want it to. In a lot of ways, you don't. Because think about like retirement accounts. There's actually some tax benefits to letting it just flow to your loved ones because they can defer when they get taxation. This stuff gets somewhat complicated, but you do want to make sure that whatever your wishes are, you're reflecting on that and at least giving a little time to think about how you want all your beneficiaries to work.
Now, one thing that we see happen, and we don't see this often, but we do see it, is you may have been great about this early on in your career and you had your beneficiary set up and you never thought about it again. But maybe then life changed. Maybe you had children or maybe you had grandchildren or unfortunately, maybe there was a divorce or a marriage that took place.
Or even a death.
Or even a death that took place. What your beneficiary says is the way that your assets will go. So it's not like if you forgot to take off a former spouse or a former person who's been deceased, you don't get to go back and change that. So you want to make sure you have that updated correctly because I can't imagine if something happened to you and your former spouse got the money and your new spouse. I just feel like that would be a very bad situation that you don't want to get yourself into.
Well, and I want to kind of go a little deeper into some financial planning concepts. Is that something that I think a lot of people take for granted is that difference, and we've even done beneficiary projects here with our own client base, is explaining people the different ways that, because you put a primary, it's easy when you ask somebody, who do you want to put as a beneficiary on your accounts? They usually list my spouse.
That's right. Yep.
Or they, or if they're not married, they'll say, well, I want to do my sister and my brother. And you're like, oh, that's great. But what happens 10 years goes by since you did that form and your brother passes away? What happens to his portion? And you need to think about this because you probably in your mind, you're thinking, well, his kids would get it.
That's what you think.
No, that is so. Bo, explain to them what the default is versus how people can do some simple things by just understanding some fancy language.
Yeah, so it gets a little complicated. Whenever things get kind of complicated, we think that illustrations make a lot of sense. So here's sort of a normal flow. Let's take Bob, who has 2 kids. He has Bart and Alice, and let's say Alice has some kids. So Bob has 2 grandkids, Ben and Ava. If Bob were to pass away, normal flow, he just wants 50% to go to Bart and 50% to go to Alice, right? Well, under the default, what's normally set up for beneficiary designations, they're set up per capita. Well, what that means is if Bob does not update his beneficiary designations and he and Alice pass away at the same time, car accident or whatever, rather than the assets automatically passing from Alice to her kids, instead, 100% would go to a surviving son, Bart. It does not happen automatically. So if you're out there listening and you're a grandparent and you want to make sure that you're protecting inheritance of wealth for your potential grandkids or grandkids that are already living, you're going to want to set up your beneficiary designations to be per stirpes. And what that means is if something were to happen to both you and Alice, instead of 100% going to Bart, 50% will still go to Bart, but then 50% will flow to Alice, and ultimately that would be split 25% between her two heirs as well. So if you're someone who's thinking about multi-generational planning, you want to make sure that you have this updated. If you're someone who had this set up one way and then grandbabies show up, you want to make sure that you're revisiting this and staying on top of it.
Yeah, it's such an important thing, and it's just, if you just understand, because most beneficiary designation forms will have that box that just says per stirpes, and a lot of times you're probably like, what does that mean?
That's right.
We just shared it with you, and hopefully this will be something that you can take and put use with. So it ensures that if you want the grandkiddos to get the money, but you're worried about the health, this will kind of ensure and protect that.
Another thing that people don't often realize is that we always talk about beneficiary designations as it exists on like retirement accounts, IRAs and 401ks and Roth IRAs. Well, one of the things you can actually do is if you do have like taxable brokerage accounts, not like held inside a trust, but like taxable brokerage accounts, you can set those up to transfer on death as well, or to be payable on death. So you actually can add beneficiaries to those too. There's not a tax benefit in the same way of like passing on IRAs, but it will pass outside the probate process, which is pretty smooth.
This is an important distinction. I have found that one of my biggest pet peeves for estate planning is that you'll have a parent, an elderly parent, and they'll say, you know what, I need this account to flow to so and so. When I pass away, I'm just going to go put their name on the account.
Yep.
And I'm like, no, you just create a huge gift tax liability without realizing you did it. There's actually a better way. You can either do it through your will, or you can make sure you do it through just, if you don't want to go the will path, you can just put a payable on death, or, that will take care of it.
I think the big thing you ought to keep in mind is not just should you update your beneficiaries, but as you are reviewing your beneficiaries, every so often you ought to just think about your whole estate plan. Are my assets titled correctly? Do I have the right plan in place? Does the plan that I had in place 10 years ago still reflect my wishes today? Because it's easy to do the things, put them in the safe deposit box, and never visit them again. If you're going to be a financial mutant, you don't want to fall into that trap.
Yeah, and think about it. The first thing you do when you meet with a state attorney is go ask you how all your accounts, like your joint accounts, most of them are with rights or survivorship, meaning that as soon as you pass away, it just goes to whoever else is on the account. You might want it for estate purposes to be tenants in common.
That's right.
So pay attention. Title definitely matters. Where you live matters. There's going to be a lot of people. You ought to have trust and other things, so pay attention to that stuff. Number 5.
Okay.
Improve your credit score.
Now, this one I thought is funny because I don't actually know anyone who's ever had this New Year's resolution, but it came up as one of the most popular ones. It's one of those ones that people are like, you know what? Maybe I made some mistakes in my prior life. Maybe I wasn't as responsible early on, but I've been listening to this Money Guy show for a while, and I know that not only is the credit score something that will allow me to go get good rates, but it might even save me money on things like my auto insurance and that sort of thing. So I bet there are people out there who think, I want to improve this. How do I do it?
I think it's probably more of a broad reaching. They're not thinking credit score and just like, man, I need things to be better. I need to be able to, when I go to the bank, I could actually borrow money, or I need to be where when I go turn on my utility bill, they're not going to make me have a deposit because my credit score is better. So here's the things. I think it's important if we showed you a slide and actually went through what are the important things you need to pay attention to if you just want to overall improve. What's your credit score? What financial institutions are basically making decisions off of you on?
So the big thing you need to recognize is there are 5 things that affect your credit score, and we're going to list them in order of how much they affect it. So the biggest thing that affects how good your credit score is your payment history. Plain and simply, do you pay your bills on time? This is an important one. It makes up 35% of your score. So you want to make sure if you do have credit card payments or auto loan payments or mortgage payments or fill in the blank, you're paying your bills on time, because even just one late payment can ding your credit score. So that's a big one.
And ding it in a big way, because this is the biggest one.
That's exactly right. Then 30% is your credit utilization. What this says is, of your available credit, how much are you utilizing? So if you have a $10,000 available credit balance, Are you using $1,000 of it? Or are you using $9,999 of it? The bigger that spread is, the bigger that margin is, the better your credit utilization.
Now, I want to share a story, self-deprecating, but hopefully you guys learn from it. I don't know if I should share it, because eventually you guys are going to be like, why would we listen to this guy? If he's this knuckleheaded, there's no way this guy's an expert.
Wisdom comes from experience. That's
exactly
a Brian Preston
right. So here's the thing. When my wife and I were buying our first house together, I thought it'd be brilliant because I knew that we were going to be applying for a mortgage. And I was like, you know what will impress these mortgage companies when they go see my credit is if they see that Brian only has access to $5,000 worth of credit, because they were going to be like, man, this guy, he makes this much money. His wife makes this much money.
He doesn't need to borrow anything.
All that money is going to be available to go to their house payment. So this is going to be no problem. So I actually called all my credit card companies, like the two, and I said, hey, I know I have a $10,000 credit limit on there. Can you take it down to $2,500?
And the credit card was like, wait, what? You want to go down?
Yeah,
we don't normally get that phone
They don't
call.
give you education on these calls because they did it. They actually did it. Well, it screwed up my credit rating because now from the credit utilization, it looked like, because even I'm paying it off monthly, if you're paying it off and there's $1,000 on the account, when I lowered everything down to $4,000, it looked like I was using a 25% utilization, which is a lot different than a 10% utilization. Exactly right. If I'd have kept it at the $10,000, I screwed up, all because I was trying to window dress. And this is why it's important. Nobody teaches you this stuff. So somebody who's already thinking like a financial mutant like me, I stepped into a huge mistake just because I thought I didn't understand how the system worked.
Now, here's my opinion on this, and I've not actually fact-checked this, so this is just going to be a Boism that I'm going to share with you. Does this mean that you should go out on every single one of your credit cards and raise the limit to the largest extent possible? Absolutely not. Have a healthy limit on your available credit. Don't use it all. But at some point, at least I have found this, no matter what income does or no matter what trajectory does, I'm not increasing how much my available credit is. I know how much I actually use, and I know where my thing is. I don't need to keep expanding that.
That doesn't mean they're not. I mean, every year, every time, like I've told you, every time I go into my credit cards right now, they're asking me to update my income.
Yep, every time.
And I'm like, nope. I'm just, remind me later, because I know that they want to expand how much the credit is. Pay attention to that stuff.
Absolutely. So then the next part is 15% of your credit score is made up of your length of credit history. Now, this is one, unfortunately, you cannot go back in time and open up credit cards. But if you're someone who opened up that student credit card in college, but you don't use it anymore and you're thinking, you know what, I really just want to shut that down, don't do it, because you want your first established credit to stay on there forever. Now, all the credit cards you open since then or all the credit lines you open up since then can close, but you want to have a long length of credit history because it makes up about 15% of your credit score.
Here's another money guy hack of this isn't, I got right. So let me brag on this one, is that my first credit card, you guys know I love Disney, right? It was not a Disney credit card. It was actually a Six Flags credit card, because I used to love going to amusement parks. So why wouldn't my first credit card ever be a Six Flags credit card, so I get those extra points and get free tickets to the park? The problem is, as I got older, I realized not really going to Six Flags anymore, so I'm not going there as much. I'd like to get out of this credit card, but it was my earliest credit card. I couldn't close it because that would totally screw up my credit history, because that was my longest length of credit. So what I did was, here's the cool thing, and here's the hack. Most credit cards now are like 5 banks. I mean, have you not noticed how many? Chase,
all the big ones.
Capital One. I mean, they're all kind of the same banks offering different versions of different credit cards. You can actually call your credit card company, and as long as it's the same family bank, they can change your credit card to a different benefits program. So that's what happened to me. I turned by that time, the banks had all merged up, that my Six Flags had turned into like a Chase card. The Chase, I was able, or First National, or whatever it was at the time, turned into a complete rewards type card. You can do this. So take advantage of that. Instead of closing that account, there might be a way, if you just call the bank, that they can change you over to a sister or sibling account that will serve you better.
Another little hack to think about is if you do have children that are getting ready to fly the nest, so you have those kids in college, perhaps it's a good idea to go ahead and help them open a credit card in their name that they use for one purpose. Maybe it's putting gas in their automobile, or maybe it's going out to eat once a month or whatever. If you go ahead and establish that now, when they do graduate and it's time to buy their first car or buy their first home, they'll already have some credit history established. Now make sure you educate your child on how to responsibly use credit. They don't get themselves into a mess, because you'd rather them learn that under your tutelage than learn it the hard way by screwing it up a whole lot. But that's something you can do for your kids in college.
So what I just heard analogy-wise is you want to have the birds and bees discussion while they're in the house about credit cards versus let them learn it on the street.
Yep, that's exactly what I just said.
That's kind of a good analogy, because that is a very smart way of looking at it.
10% is types of credit. This is just you have secured debt or unsecured debt, secured being like a home mortgage, unsecured being like credit card. And then the last 10% is how often are you inquiring for new debt? How often are you opening up new credit cards, opening up new lines? If you're getting close to a major purchase like buying a car, buying a house, don't go open up a bunch of credit cards, and don't try to go open up a bunch of store credit to be able to furnish the house. You're going to end up hurting your credit score.
And then I'll just close. This is not part of your credit score, but it's living in the same family tree. Is, by the way, there's more crooks. If you're now at the level of success that you're not opening up credit cards, you've already got your mortgage, you're in a good place financially, consider freezing your credit card.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, your credit rating and your credit score, because it's 3 credit bureaus. You can freeze it so easily on the internet these days, because there's more crooks trying to use your credit than likely you're trying to use your credit. So it's just great peace of mind. So consider looking into the details on that.
Love it.
Number 4, get rid of that student debt.
Now, interestingly, in our content, I was like, hey guys, y'all really think people do this? And like, every single member of the content team was like, yes, all of my friends, their New Year's resolution is, I got to get rid of my student loan debt. I got to get out of this. It's a problem in this country. So I bet a lot of folks are thinking, should I and how should I axe this student loan debt I've run up?
Yeah, we've talked about this, but because I know we're going to give the slide of what you should consider on paying it off. But I would tell you, because I know we have younger listeners too, if you're actually in school right now, remember our guideline is you don't want to come out of college with more student loan debt than the anticipated first year salary out of college, because that's going to keep you open and honest about, is this the right major? Should I go private versus public? Should I go to community college for the first 2 years and then transfer into the public university? I think if you can go into it with clear eyes as to begin with the end in mind, you will be so much more successful.
But maybe you're someone who's already made it through the gamut and you're sitting there like, okay, well guys, I wish I would have known that, but I do have student loan debt.
Yep.
How do I prioritize paying it off? Well, like most money guy things, it's just nerdy and mathematical. And we understand that whenever we go out and take risk, we're generally rewarded for that. That's called the equity risk premium, the additional reward we get for taking on additional risk. Well, younger folks theoretically should have a larger risk premium than older folks. So looking at historical averages, this is what we have discerned. If you're in your 20s and your student loan debt is above 6%, you should probably prioritize paying it off.
Yeah.
If it's below 6%, your army of dollar bills is still so powerful, perhaps you should focus on building your army. Once you get into your 30s, if your student loan debt is above 5%, you should probably prioritize paying it off. If it's below 5%, it's really strong in your army. In your 40s, the number goes to 4%. And then our view is by the time you get into your 50s, you shouldn't be carrying student loan debt anymore. You ought to be, saving for college for your grandkids maybe, or thinking about that.
So look at those. I do think that's powerful rules, because people are trying to figure out, do I do a Roth IRA or do I pay off this 4% student loan rate? This will kind of be a good, matrix of decision making to help you kind of know how to navigate that. So that's very helpful. Number 3, give more to charity.
Yeah, this is a good one. And, I think most, I serve on the board of a nonprofit. I think 2020, it's been hard for individuals.
Solid drop in, by the way.
What?
Just kidding.
I mean, did I mention that out loud? No, it's interesting to have a unique insight there. A lot of charities have been really negatively affected by 2020 as well. A lot of nonprofit organizations. So I think this is a great one. If you are someone, maybe 2020 wasn't as bad for you as it was for others, it's a great opportunity to maybe figure out how can I positively impact the world around me.
Well, I thought it was interesting when we did our pre-show meeting. We had the content team, Which are there any rules on here of these 10 that you'd actually do? And Daniel was like, I plan to give more to charity this year.
And I was like, golf clap for that, Daniel.
So well done, FTE. But I do think this is so powerful because, we want to make sure that you are thinking outside of yourself. We've talked about, we've done a lot of shows on the relationship between money and happiness. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people think that when I reach a certain level of success, that is going to open up all these opportunities. And what we found, that's not actually what creates fulfillment and happiness. Yes, the threshold of you got to get to that 75,000 so you can cover the basic needs. Mm-hmm. But there is, once you got the basics covered, you're going to find that what brings you happiness and fulfillment, in addition to family and friends and great relationships and those type of things, it's also, are you thinking outside yourself and being generous? That's where do you think the saying, it's better to give than to receive? Right. As a kid, I used to think suckers, but then as you get older, you realize, no, there's something to that. If I can watch people, and by the way, here's the other side of it. And Bo, I've given you this compliment on multiple shows. I try to get this into both of my kids. If you can be a great gift receiver and be very thankful, make sure whenever somebody does something nice for you, that you go over the top to thank them. Mm-hmm. Guess what? More stuff gets given to you because people who are generous want to continue to pay it forward. And I would encourage you to get on that train of being generous. And if you don't have money, because I get it, a lot of you guys, you're aspirational, you're building the skills. Give of your time. Go mentor, do something, be more charitable, and I think it will be powerful.
Now, the money guys spend on charitable giving is, one, things have changed a little bit. First, if you are someone who recognized that in 2018, the tax law changes and the standard deduction went huge. For a single individual, it's around like $12,000, and for married couples, it's around like $24,000. A lot of folks who are itemizing their deductions by giving to charity now are standard deductors, so they're not technically getting a tax benefit for that. Well, first thing, if you're someone who falls into that camp of being a standard deductor in 2020, make sure you go at least give $300 to charity, because this year only you can get above the line $300 charitable deduction. So that's kind of the first thing. Second thing is, if you are someone who gives to charity, but maybe it's not quite enough to get you into the itemized realm, maybe you should think about a strategy like using a charitable gift fund for like by-year grouping. Instead of giving $5,000 this year and $5,000 next year, I'll give $10,000 every other year, and then potentially I can get some tax benefit from doing so. So those are some advanced strategies you can look at.
And then if you're one of these people, you're all in on the being charitable, you've reached a level of success that you do give. You tithe, you do other things that your tax return easily reflects that you're a charitable person. But if you have a taxable investment account that has built up large capital gains, use like a Fidelity charitable gift fund, because usually, guys, there's a better way to give charity that will respect your intent, but also be better from a tax planning way. This is the way I've always. This is the way I've done it, and I have a whole unique structure. We've done shows on advanced strategies for wealthy people, and I'm telling you, charity is one of those things. There's a reason the government structures it in a way that you're actually rewarded for being generous.
Yep, love it.
Number 2, increase your income.
Now, this one I think is going to be one that people do. I think a lot of people say, you know what, this is going to be the year I'm going to will myself to make more money than I did in the year prior. I think this is one that people actually do latch on to.
So how do you increase it? Because, man, that sounds great. I mean, you know what? 2021, abracadabra, hocus pocus, I want more income. I mean, you can see the picture that Daniel used on the slide, if you're watching on YouTube, is basically money's falling out of the sky. That's not reality. I mean, let's face it. So, Bo, what are we talking about when we say you're going to make more income? How do you do this?
Yeah, so the first thing is you have to think about where you're currently making income now. Are there ways or mechanisms in your current lot, in your current circumstance, to go improve what you're doing? Now, for some folks, maybe that's going out there and getting additional education. You know, like I think teachers can go get advanced degrees and it will impact their pay. Maybe there's a professional certification you can go get that would allow you to market yourself at a different level. Or perhaps there's a conversation you can have at the company with which you work to suggest how you might be able to take on more responsibility to ultimately impact your career trajectory.
Now, and I said we're not actually going to cover that during the show, but I'm going to give a little tidbit, is that we're both employers.
Yep.
And I see a lot of articles out there right now telling everybody, know your value and go in there and demand from your employer that they pay you this, even use ultimatums as a powerful tool. I would tell you to be very cautious and careful with that guidance. So here's something, we hear a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. You know what makes it better if you have an employer that you feel like is not paying you what you're worth? Give them a spoonful of sugar. And the way you can do that, it's so much easier if you will to share your values, if you will create a win-win situation. I feel like that is a lost art that a lot of people, especially the people that are giving this guidance and through all the financial publications of go in there and throw down the gauntlet and tell them what you're worth. No, go in there and tell them where there's a place of improvement at the company. Hey, and if you want me to take on that responsibility, I'd love to shift into this role and maybe we could increase my responsibilities as well as increase the compensation. A lot of employers are going to be like, wow, I had not thought about that. That's great. And it's going to change their mindset versus, ultimatums, they're dangerous. So just be very careful with that.
One of the comments came in just right. You could walk in there and say, hey, I demand this, do this for me. And your employer might say, all right, well, bye. I'm not going to do that. Don't let the door hit you. And you just don't want to put yourself in that situation. Now, I do think this is interesting. If you are thinking about ways to increase your income, we live in probably the best time in history to take advantage of the gig economy, right? We always talk about, when I was here, time is money. There has never been a truer point in time that if you have time right now, there are ways to go out and make money. Whether it's driving for Uber or shopping on Instacart or blogging or ghostwriting or dog walk or whatever the thing is, this is a side gig economy. So one of the things you have to do is you got to get off your duff and go do it. So if your goal in 2021 is to increase your income and you can't do it in the normal, 40-hour thing that you're doing, perhaps you got to think about a side gig that you can start doing to help influence that.
Solid advice. I mean, these are unique times. I think we've seen that. So, and now more people can work from home.
Yep.
You might be opening up a different opportunity. And then last thing I'll throw out is just the last, because we've been the beneficiary of this. Sometimes you have to take a lateral move to even a step back to get to bigger income. So maybe your goal to make more income is not actually a 1-year goal. Maybe it's actually a 3 to 4 year goal, because how many people, think about Eric, who moved from Texas, who's now one of our lead advisors. He was a CPA working in this profession, but he knew this is where his calling was. Took a side move to know he had to move sideways to move forward. And I think a lot of you guys, we have picked up engineers, we've picked up doctors that are now working as financial planners. I want you guys to know the depth of our bench here at Abound Wealth is some of the smartest and some of the most unique career paths that I think that all is very beneficial. And I love the field vision. I talk about that. People always are a little jealous of success and the fact that they're like, how did they know how to do that? How did they know that was going to happen? I call that field vision. So I want you to challenge yourself to maybe where you actually want to go is not a 12-month thing. Maybe it's something that's going to take a little longer. Go ahead and create that vision plan so you can actually land there.
Now, before we move on to this last one, did you bookend it on purpose? Because I just recognized that we started with go out and enjoy yourself and go do all the things and yay. But number one's a little bit different. Number one is actually the other side of it. Number one is the deferred gratification piece.
Yeah, number one is I want you to give a little bit of today for a great big beautiful tomorrow, which is number one is invest more for retirement.
See, I love this one, or I did not love the first one. I love this one. Because if you can be scrappy early on, and you can figure out how do I go get an extra $10, $20, $30 over a long enough time horizon, that adds up and it gets just so saucy. It is an exciting thing to watch happen.
No, it is. That's one of the things I think the army of dollar bills, there's a reason this is one of our branded concepts, is because, guys, we all get to points where we either burned out or tired of working ourselves. So we need to have our army of dollar bills do the heavy lifting for us. And this is the way to do it. The sooner you start saving for the future, the more successful you'll be. And that's one of the things we talk about that concept
Absolutely.
nonstop.
Yeah, we talk about the 88 times over concept. And what that is that a 20-year-old who can defer $1 today can turn that into $88 by the time that they're 65. We even have a koozie that says, hey, this $1 beer cost me $88 because they're going to retire at 66. It's a 21-year-old. Don't send us the hate comments. It's a 21-year-old that's retiring at 66, 88 times over. A 25-year-old, it drops to 44. A 30-year-old, it drops to 23. You can see just how powerful time is. But what I love is the one thing that most young folks don't have is a ton of money just sitting around. They don't have tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they've got $10 here and $20 there and $30 there. If you can just piece together those small little bits of money and you start thinking about this multiplying effect, it gets so exciting.
Yeah, so we've made this easy for you too. Go to moneyguy.com/resources. We actually have a deliverable, a free thing that you can download called the Wealth Multiplier, aka how powerful are your dollars? That's what you're going to look for.
You nailed it.
How powerful are your dollars? Reby put it in the show notes. But it's this will allow you to go look at your actual age, because a lot of you guys aren't 20 years old. You might be 24. You might be 27. This will let you know exactly what every dollar decision you make, because it's not only on saving, it's also on the spending side, because you might now, when you look at your car payment, because remember, we have rules like 23-8, where I want you to put down at least 20%. Don't finance for more than 3 years. And then you can't even do this 8% of your total gross income. But you can't even do this unless your savings, your investing is greater than the car payment. These things are important because I want your army of dollar bills working for you in the future. So look at what your wealth multiplier is worth so you get motivated by that.
Now, I want to throw something out there because we get this a lot, and it's not something that we've actually addressed. We didn't talk about this in show prep, but it's on my heart, so I'm going to share it. A lot of folks hear us talk about it. Guys, I'm not 20 anymore, and I'm not 35, and I'm not 40. Maybe I'm in my 50s. Well, when you think about your portfolio, yeah, if you're in your 50s, some part of your portfolio has to get you ready for 65. We know that. That's why we have this, probably a bigger part that's when they're 20s. But if you're going to be an investor for the next 40 years, meaning you're someone in your 50s and you have an age 90 time horizon, there are pieces of your portfolio that can still do this, that can still turn over 40, 50, 60 times. Just because you may be a little bit longer in the tooth doesn't mean that your dollars still can't be powerful for you. It's just you might be saving those powerful dollars for your 70s, for your 80s, and so on. It's not like the clock stops at 65. So don't let that be discouraging. Let it be really, really encouraging that a little bit can still go a long way.
I think that's a great point, because there are a lot of people that do get, I'm not 20 years old, but Bo, we know this from managing assets. Just because you hit 65, we don't go from a diversified portfolio to zero, 100% cash type holding that you just got to burn through over the next years. No, you have a glide path on your asset allocation. So Bo's exactly right. When you're 40 years of age, there still are assets that will be growing for 45 years, assuming you live a ripe, full life. And here's the tools. When we talk about how do you maximize this, when we're talking about financial order of operations, we're talking about your Roth IRAs, your health savings accounts, maxing out your 401k, your 403b, all those retirement options with your employer, and then get into hyperaccumulation. Remember how we started the show, and this is what Bo was talking about, very bookend side. We want you saving 20 to 25% of your gross income as soon as possible.
Absolutely, man. New Year is a great time to change your outlook, to start over, to revamp some things that maybe went wrong in 2020. I think it's great if you start thinking about these things, start putting it together. But here's what you got to do. If you're serious about it, you got to write it down. And you got to put it on your refrigerator, and you got to put it on your bathroom mirror. You got to put it on your desk at the office, because you want to constantly remind yourself. If you want something to help, go out to our website, moneyguy.com/resources. If you need to be reminded how powerful your dollars are, or the opportunity cost of spending that money, go print out how powerful your dollars and put it, on the little console of your car, so that when you get in that Starbucks line, you might say, all right, $4.50, do I really want it? My answer is yes, but if you know you're saving, doing what you're supposed to be doing, it can help you make those decisions to not lose track of the resolutions you set on January 1st.
Once you put those goals on paper, it's amazing how that invisible hand in your brain starts doing things for you. So essentially, it's working for you 24 hours a day to get you to the path of success. Guys, we do this, the abundance cycle. We work with clients all across the country. It started just like you did. They come here, they learn, they apply, they grow their wealth using these concepts, and then one day they need to graduate to a professional advisor. That's how we get people. We call that the abundance cycle. I also think I would ask you, if you're asking how you can help the Money Guy Show, we have a ticker right over our shoulder that shows that right now we have 90,400 YouTube subscribers. We have a goal of 100,000 by year end. It's going to be tight. I need you to go tell friends. I need you to go tell relatives, because you're going to have opportunity in the next few weeks. Do it, and then make sure you're not renting your seat too. We need you to subscribe, because I need us to be at 100,000 by year end. I'd love you to pay it forward and help us out.
Love it, love it, love it.
Money Guy team, out.